Another example I liked of the misunderstandings of it. This came from a book called The Ladybird Book of Mindfulness. In ancient times, Guru Belland entered a state of mindfulness that lasted 35 years. During that time, he contemplated everything and sought to solve all spiritual questions. When he had finished, he wrote the answer on a grain of rice. He never married. Now that's weird, right? That's a weird story. So here's this guy, he gets mindful, but he thinks it's about answering every question, and he misses his life. Okay? Not that getting married's necessary to have a good life, but he's not living, he's trying to figure out things. So it's not that. That's a long-rooted way of saying, don't get caught in the thinking process. More, it's an untangling and a coming down from thinking process. So the second level of inquiry I'd like to explore with you is how, when we're caught in emotional suffering, we can use posing these questions to untangle the tangle, okay? And here's the basic formula for when we're in emotional suffering. In those moments, if you're having a hard time, if you're caught in an emotion that is gripping you like fear or anger or judgment or shame or whatever it is, in those moments, you're living in an interpretive world, you're living in a trance, you're believing beliefs that are causing you trouble, that are triggering off feelings that you're identified with. So your whole sense of beingness has become confined in a little world of limiting beliefs and waves of feeling that are defining you. Okay? That's the moments of emotional suffering. And so undoing that trance absolutely requires investigation. Now, many of you are familiar with rain, so rain's a very good example, because rain basically is saying bringing a mindful attention and going deep with the investigation and then holding things with kindness. So I'll give you an example of one person who was able to find some freedom using this kind of inquiry or investigation, then we'll try it out. And as I often do, I'm going to be asking you to think of something in your life where you have felt stuck in some way, and then we'll explore how inquiry can help, okay? So you might be kind of thinking about what example you might use. All right, so in this particular situation, there's a couple of years ago, a young man I was in touch with who had come to some retreats, and he joined a nonprofit, environmental nonprofit, and real bright group of people he was working with, and he was the new kid on the block. And so whenever they'd have their weekly meetings with the different sub-teams, then brainstorming, he got very insecure. And even though he might have some good ideas when he wasn't with the team, he'd just go into self-doubt. So he would kind of become all tied up and really unable to engage. So we did some practice of RAIN, and for those that aren't familiar with RAIN, it's an acronym for mindfulness. And here's what we would do. He'd get in touch with his feelings of insecurity, and the R of RAIN is just to recognize it's going on. Okay, insecure. And the A of RAIN is let it be there. Allow it to just be as it is right now. So recognize and allow. That's the ground level of being able to bring that light of awareness, okay? Recognize it and allow it. And then we began the I, which is to investigate or inquire into what's happening. So I asked him some questions. One of the questions is, well, what are you believing when you're in that group? And he said, well, I'm believing I'm inferior, that they're going to find out and reject me, that I'll lose my status, my belonging here. Okay, that was the belief. And it's a common belief. When we scratch below the surface, we often will find this belief that I'm falling short or I'm inferior, that that's going to be found out, I'm going to fail, I'll be rejected. Okay? So he found that was his belief. Then he continued to investigate, and I said, okay, well, when you're believing that, what are you feeling? And that's a question to go into his body. And what he found was this kind of tight pressure in his chest and his throat, a kind of feeling of being squeezed. And I asked, well, what's it like to live with that in your life? And is this like just in this situation? He goes, actually, I go through a lot of my days with that kind of squeezed feeling. And then it got really sad. He said, well, it just disconnects me from myself. I'm not at home. So then I asked him another question. I said, well, ask that fear place what it most needs. It's an important question, by the way. This is when you're doing inquiry, to feel the fear in your body and says, well, what does that place need? Okay, what does it want? And he was surprised because the response was just to accept that it's there, not to presume it shouldn't be there. Okay? So the response he was being asked to give to that fear was, okay, it's like this. It's okay, you're here. So every time he'd feel himself getting into that anxiety, anticipating his team meeting, he would pause. He'd recognize, okay, it's insecurity. He'd allow it. He'd say, okay, believing, all right, believing I'm going to fail, feeling the squeeze, needing, oh, it's okay that it's there. Okay, it's okay to be there. And that's the I. The N of rain is to offer some kindness, some nourishing. Okay, so he's just nourishing. It's okay to be here. He'd offer what's needed. When you offer what's needed, that's the N of rain, nourishing. Every time he'd do it, he found, before he started rain, he was this tight, small, scared, insecure self that was going to blow it. And after rain, after the nourishing, his identity had shifted, and he was resting in a larger space, kind of the witness, the awareness, the compassionate place. He wasn't caught in his small self. Now, that didn't mean he wouldn't go into the meeting and still feel some waves of anxiety. But it meant that he had more choice because there's more space around it. He was inhabiting a larger sense of his being. And this is the gift of inquiry. That when you go past the interpreted world and you begin to sense what's really going on and investigate, you end up sensing a bigger space that you're living from. There's more understanding. There's more space. So one of the questions he would sometimes ask himself after he had done rain is that insecure, tongue-tied person who I really am? And I just want to toss someone out to you because it can be very helpful once you've gotten a little more perspective just to ask that, is that scared person, is that insecure or self-conscious or embarrassed or whatever person really who I am? Because it becomes so clear that who you are cannot be confined by that small story. You're bigger than that. And that's the gift of inquiry. So working with fears is one of the most important domains for inquiry because when we're afraid, we're believing something that isn't true.